Hello, hello. So today got my gonna talk about my Native American ancestry. Some of you showed some interest in that, and it has definitely explained a lot for me. I've always felt like I had this fire like burning inside of me, like this passion. Even though I'm soft spoken, it's like this burning fire to just do something like powerful. Got my all power Nako shirt on today, which a lot of Nako going on in my thoughts. Got my hair braided uh, to honor the native thing. Nako's got a song where he says, hair like sweetgrass braided through. Got some sweetgrass here in the window. Got some sweetgrass braided through. Aho man. Got that fire in you. So here he is. This is my ancestor, Chief Spotted Tail, Brûlée Lakota Sioux tribe. That's one picture. Got another one over here. That's Sitting Bull. But if you can see this guy right here is Spotted Tail, Chief Spotted Tail. Have a couple other pictures here on the computer, all set up, ready to go. Let me show you that, and then we'll get into some of the history. Let's see. Can you see that one? And then, let's see, one more. How do I get it? Oh, so this one is actually this summer when I went to visit his grave site, just outside of Rosebud in South Dakota on the reservation where I grew up. Well, I grew up in South Dakota, not on the reservation. But today I just wanted to give you some history. Let me try to set this phone down so we got that under control. All right. So I'm going to go off some notes because it's not all in my brain, but it's believed that the Sioux were originally from South Carolina and North Carolina, like in the 1500s. They were mainly farmers. They didn't ride horses yet. Then they were forced to move by the Iroquois. The Sioux were divided into 7 nations called 7 Council Fires. And one of those nations was the Tetons, called Tinta, dwellers on the plains, and they spoke Lakota. So you had the Dakota speakers, the Nakota speakers, and the Lakota speakers. The Tetons were Lakota speakers, and they went into eventually South Dakota and Nebraska. And this is my lineage. The Tetons were subdivided into also 7 groups. The Oglala, who now inhabit Pine Ridge. That was the largest. The Brûlée, also known as Sikanju or Burnt Thighs. They are on the Rosebud Reservation. The next largest was the Hunkpapa. They are on Standing Rock, which you probably know about from the pipeline. The Minneconjou are on the Cheyenne River. 2 Kettles, and then there was Blackfeet and Sans Arc without bows. So the Brûlée, the Sikanju tribe, the second largest of the Tetons, also known as Sikanju or Burnt Thighs Nation. They were called Brûlée which literally means burnt in French, and I'll tell you the story as to why that is in a minute. But in the mid-1700s, the Tetons began migrating on foot. They had already gone up to Pipestone in the western Minnesota area, and in the 1700s they start to move into the eastern parts of South Dakota. One of the bands was camping beside a lake on probably by Lake Preston or Whitewood or Thompson. This would have been near where the Ingalls were homesteading, famous from Little House on the Prairie. And a fire breaks out on the prairie, in the prairie grass, killing a man and his wife and some children. The rest of the band is saved by jumping into the lake. However, not before most of them having their legs and thighs burned and scarred. As a result, they were called sikanju, or burnt thighs. And then the French traders later encountered them and called them brûlée, which means burnt, like creme brulee. So that's where they get the Brûlée name from. Late in the 1700s, they continue to migrate, and they become horsemen. Some of the best Indian horsemen there ever was. So getting into my ancestry, the Brûlée population in White River begins to increase. Some of the Oglalas join them. One of the also the Sioux bands from the north start to join the Brûlée population as well. And one of these Sioux migrants is Kunkka, or Tanglehair, also known as Chomanishi, the grease that turns around. He was a Blackfoot Sioux, and he ends up marrying a Brûlée girl named Walks with the Pipe, and they had several children. Well, one of those children was Jumping Buffalo, Tatanka Napsika. He was born in 1823, 1824, and this obviously is who I'm wanting to talk about. He eventually has a name change and becomes Chief Spotted Tail later in his life. But as a boy, he's Jumping Buffalo. As a boy, he went off with some other young Brûlées, and the party came to a stream where some white trappers were camped. One of the trappers was skinning a raccoon. The boy who was to become the great chief stood watching the trapper, and the white man began to speak to him, probably in the Indian sign language. He offered the raccoon tail, telling the boy to wear it and to take his name from it. So that's what he did. He ends up making a war bonnet and putting this raccoon tail on it. And by the middle of the 1800s, he's become a great warrior. He's known to be a Tanka-un, which is a war shirt wearer or war chief. His war dress is adorned with locks of hair from 100 scalps gained between 1835 and 1855. So he was no joke. Only the most distinguished war leaders could own a scalp shirt. He's considered head soldier, Wakikunsa, of his camp. A few years later, there's an infamous fight called the Graton fight. There was a Mormon wagon train passing Sioux camp. The head chief, High Forehead, shot an ox trailing one of the wagons. Lieutenant J.L. Grattan was eager for stiff action and led a party of 31 men into the camp 300 yards from Bordeaux's, which was a French trading station, to attempt to arrest High Forehead. After 45 minutes of tense discussion and provocation, a shot rang out in the camp and war broke out, leaving all of the government officials dead, as well as Chief Brave Bear. Man afraid of his horse, of the Oglalas, grand partisan of the Brûlée corn band, Little Thunder of the South Brûlées, Spotted Tail, and Red Cloud were all present at this battle. By the way, Spotted Tail had gained his name change by this time because, being a war chief, he was well known for his raccoon tail and his war bonnet, and everybody just started calling him Spotted Tail. So anyway, because he was part of this Grattan battle, Brave Bear's and Brave Bear ends up getting killed in this battle. So Brave Bear's brother, Redleaf, and Redleaf's half-brother, Longchin, as well as Spotted Tail, who was their cousin, with two young brothers of Redleaf, go to avenge the death of Brave Bear. They attack a mail wagon on its way to Salt Lake City at Horse Creek, killing 3 white men and taking the mail, which included a box with about $20,000 in gold in it, which was never found. Sneaky. August 10th, Agent Twist, this is a year later, they go after these guys, including Spotted Tail. Agent Twist orders friendly tribes to move south of the Platte River for protection. By September 8th, 400 lodges were assembled at Laramie Fork. Spotted Tail, Redleaf, Iron Shell, and Little Thunder were camped along Blue Water, 6 miles northwest of Ash Hollow. General W.S. Harney was summoned from Paris to lead the troops and arrived at Fort Kearny on August 20. On September 2nd or 3rd, Harney crossed the North Platte in a night raid on Blue Water Camp. Spotted Tail, Little Thunder, and Iron Shell rode out to try to delay them, but the troops continued advancing. The Sioux left everything behind, started to flee the camp. The leaders tried to turn and ride back to the camp, but were pursued under gunfire. In the end, Spotted Tail sustained 2 pistol bullets through his body and 2 severe saber cuts. At least one of his wives and a baby daughter were taken captive by the troops. Out of 250 Indians in the camp, 86 were killed, 70 were captured and sent to Fort Kearny. This was the first time a big Sioux camp had ever been captured by enemies. It was a stunning blow. Harney demanded that those involved in the attack on the mail wagon be surrendered by his return in the spring. Spotted Tail and his companions, Redleaf and Longchin, appeared in Fort Laramie to surrender. 2 young warriors, Standing Elk and Red Plume, surrendered in place of the 2 younger brothers of Redleaf. Spotted Tail took his younger wife with him and was later joined by his older wife and the 1 to 3 children captured and taken to Fort Kearny. They were all taken to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, so all the way from South Dakota down to Kansas, arriving in December 11th, 1855. They ended up receiving pardons on January 16th by President Pierce, and they were returned to Fort Laramie in October or November of 1856. So they let him go. But Spotted Tail, in this great, in his travel all the way down to Kansas, he realized that the white people are too vast. He saw their brick structures, he saw their massive amounts of people and infiltration, he saw their weaponry and their soldiers, and he realized basically one of the, if not the very first Native American chief to realize that any military war against the white people would be lost. And as a chief, he had his people in mind, and so he realized that they were either going to become extinct or he was going to have to make peace with them. And that's what that was a turn. At that point, they began to work toward peace treaties with the United States government, and Spotted Tail was sent to Washington like 4 different times, meeting with President Grant and I think mostly President Grant, but I think there were others. He was also at one point given 9 months to go to his favorite hunting grounds in Republican Fork, and he hosted a Russian Grand Duke Alexis on a buffalo hunt for the government in January 1872. The Whetstone Agency of 1874 was changed to the name Spotted Tail Agency. And then, so, you know, he had a lot of influence, meeting with the president, you know, there's a college in Mission, South Dakota that I visited that is called Sinte Gleshka College, which means Spotted Tail College. It's like the one college that teaches native traditions and the Lakota language, so that's an important college. There is a plaque in Mission. His grave site is still there in Rosebud, so he had a lot of influence. And I got all this information from this very thick biography on his life, which I was super stoked to get my hands on. August 5th, 1881, Crow Dog, a leader of an opposition party against Spotted Tail, he was also appointed chief of police on the agency, shot Spotted Tail in the chest while he was riding home from a council meeting to discuss another trip to Washington. It seemed to be mostly out of jealousy and hatred because Crow Dog wanted to be the chief. But there was also an allegation that Spotted Tail had stole his wife, Light, in the lodge. It might have been manufactured. There's no mention of it at times. He was laid out, dressed in his handsome buckskin clothing, which was beaded and had the insignia of his rank embroidered on it with dyed porcupine quill work. His face was painted red. He was probably buried on a scaffold, but was reburied in the Episcopal Cemetery just north of the agency. And 10 years later, a white marble monument was placed over his grave, which I showed you a picture of. Crow Dog was taken to Deadwood and tried for murder. He was sentenced to be hung, but then it was overturned as the Dakota government had no jurisdiction over Indians killing other Indians. He was released back to Rosebud. Today, there are 13,000 Oglalas living on Pine Ridge, 8,000 Brûlées on Rosebud, 650 Brûlées on the lower Brûlée reservation, 4,500 Minneconjous on Cheyenne River, 2,300 Sisseton Wahpetons on Lake Traversey, 1,300 Crow Creeks on Crow Creek, 900 Yankton on Yankton, 5,000 Hunkpapas on Standing Rock, 275 Santee on Flandreau, 2,000 Sioux at Devil's Lake, North Dakota, 300 Santee in Nebraska, some Sioux on the Fort Peck in Fort Peck, Montana, and about 20,000 Sioux live off the reservation. So there's a little history lesson for you. I'm very proud to descend from this great chief. I feel his blood burning inside of me. I feel his leadership. I feel his care for people. I have a strong desire to create tribe and to protect tribe and to live in community, and I think that all of this stuff may come from this source, I feel. Anyway, going over time, the videos just keep getting longer. 19 minutes today, but I promise I'm going to try to bring it back down to about 15. But I had a lot to cover today. Give me a little slack. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm really enjoying sharing these videos. Talk to y'all maybe tomorrow.